morning, Tim. Looks like I have very bad connection right now. One moment.
GM. Can you hear me all right? Let me just check. I can hear you, I think. I think I can hear you.
Is that any better, friends? According to Discord, my ping is 1500 milliseconds. So
Jeez.
definitely bad.
Oh my god. But you're coming through pretty
I was
good.
muted, sorry.
You're coming through.
Hey, sir.
GM, how are you?
I'm gonna keep trying switching around here if you want to start it off.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Okay, right on. Yeah, just ping me whenever your thing's working a little better. This is Aavegotchi DAO discussion every Sunday. We have this. Welcome all 31 of you. Again, shout out to Hardcore for putting together the Miro board. There's a link there in the chat. Oh, I can hear some echo. Is that me? Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Hardcore. So yeah, we're as usual, we're gonna go through some old business real quick. I'll keep an eye on the chat and then yeah. Oh man, this is annoying. I just getting this double echo right now, so I'm hearing myself speak. Give me 1 second, guys. I just gotta change my audio settings. How's this? Yeah, Discord's just been terrible lately. Absolutely terrible. Yeah, I know you can't hear an echo, but I can hear myself talking over myself, and it's annoying. I'm gonna come off stage and I'll try coming back on.
Yeah, I'm back as well, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think
I can hear
Discord's
you.
having some issues today or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, but it's hard for me to hear you for some reason.
And then I'm talking over myself, so I can hear double voices when I'm talking, and it's yeah, it's just annoying. But we'll get through it. Yeah, so we'll go through old business first. If you guys can't hear me echoing, that's fine. I'm just gonna try and I'll bear with it. Yeah. So old business, we're gonna be adding, or I think we're talking currently about adding some DAO liquidity to the Ghost Alk pairs. But this would not be dipping into the glitter rewards, right? This is something we touched on briefly yesterday, where we could talk as a DAO how much Ghost we would be comfortable LPing, and we have a lot of Ghost in there, but it doesn't have to necessarily be a large amount. I think in the DAO discussions there, it seems like 30,000 Ghost was brought up. But I know, Dan, I think you had commented and said that 30,000 could be a little low based on what we already have. So we could allocate a little bit more to that if we felt comfortable as a DAO to do that. So I think it's good to add some liquidity for those pools. It shows the project has strength. I know you made some good points yesterday around that. So if anybody has anything to say on what they think of adding DAO liquidity to the Ghost Alk pairs, I see Hardcore. You're saying Wagman suggested 30K, 30 and 50K is the options. Okay. I think the number of 75K was also talked about yesterday. 75K USD. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. I mean, how does everyone feel about that? With the liquidity for the actual pools, it doesn't affect our rewards in any way. Total liquidity is about 16.6K or so currently. Dang. million. Okay. So to make a significant impact, then do you guys think we would have to add more liquidity than what's being proposed? 75K, adding 75K to 1.6 mil? Like, is that going to have a.
Hey friends, I finally found a network that looks good, so hopefully
Nice.
everything's smooth.
I can hear you.
Cool.
Yeah, I know, Igor. I have echo. It's terrible. I don't know what to do about it. I've tried leaving the stage and coming back. I could restart my
I think
Discord.
they're saying 75K per pair,
Per
and the
pair.
total per pair, yeah. The total liquidity is there's like most of the four Alchemica have 300K each, and Ghost Glitter has 500K worth of liquidity total.
Okay. I'm just trying to think in percentage terms. What percentage of increase is this going to be for the pool if we go with the 75K USD per option? In percentage terms, do we know?
It'd be about a 25% increase, so 300K up to 375K. I mean, it would be 25% of the current pool.
Oh yeah, okay. And that's before we get more people coming into the glitter LPs, right? Because that'll deepen the liquidity for the actual individual pools, right? As we get more people coming in for staking, like LP staking.
Well, it wouldn't affect that. That's
No.
going to happen no matter what,
Yeah.
because the DAO is not planning to stake for glitter rewards.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, adding this, liquidity here, plus we're gonna hopefully getting more people coming over to stake for glitter, which will add more liquidity to those pools, right?
Yeah, I would say the two are not necessarily like intimately connected.
Okay.
Like it's not going to lead. Adding more liquidity makes the pools a little bit more attractive for if someone wants to like make a big buy and have lower slippage, but it wouldn't necessarily lead to like more interest in staking.
Yeah.
Like just by itself.
Yeah. You did make a point yesterday, just that it might, look good in terms of. I think you were saying make the project look really good with lots of liquidity available for people to buy large amounts if they want, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it never hurts. That's one of the
Yeah.
first things that people look at when they're like looking
Interesting.
at a new project.
So, I mean, in the chat there, what do you guys think? 75K per pair? Like, does that sound good to you guys? We have a lot of funds in the DAO, right? We have like what, 5 million ghosts or something like that. And then Alchemica too. We have a ton of Alchemica. I think, yeah, let's look here. Let's look at the proposals. I don't think there's an official proposal made for that yet. Yeah, it's a discussion at the moment. Dr. Wagme's proposal was 30,000 ghosts. So that would be per pair. Definitely check out that thread and provide your feedback if you have some insight there. $78K. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll talk to Wagme and see if he wants to make a proposal, an official SIG prop around that, and then we can have some actionable thing we can do with that. Get the liquidity moved into those pools. If there are no crazy concerns someone might have about that. But you can definitely voice your concerns in that thread there. Yeah, I like Nestor's numbers, 69K. I like that. Okay, so that's part of the old business there. We're talking about ghost alg pairs, adding some liquidity. It sounds like people are on board. Oh, Igor, question. Does the DAO have Alchemica and Glitter in the treasury? They have, yeah, exactly. Right. Uh, Alchemica lots of ghosts, no glitter. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Mikey J also. There'd be very few objections if staking's not involved. It's not going to impact rewards in any way. We reiterate that. So reiterate that in the SIG prop as well. And maybe we can do something actionable on that. I don't think, I don't see any major objections to that. Uh, so moving on. We briefly have been talking about, well, not briefly, but we have been talking about setting the limits on the number of gotchis allowed per address. This has been flipped back to unlimited for now, but there is an ongoing discussion around um, potentially limiting it. And there's a couple of different suggestions there. What do people think? Uh, what do people think of going back to one of the other suggestions, and why would we want to go back to the other suggestions? Here are the voting options. You could have had, you could have set the limit on the number of gotchis each address can borrow from the open market, equal to the number of parcels, plus one. You could revert back to the original unlimited system and do nothing further, allowing unlimited numbers of borrowed gotchis per address. That's kind of where we are right now. We've reverted back. Uh, we could have reverted back and leave the open rental market to allow unlimited gotchis to be borrowed, but to set the default to 1 on all whitelists and implement the ability for whitelist creators to change the limit per wallet. So you'd be able to change how many gotchis can be held per wallet. And that way, maybe that gives the whitelist owner a little bit more control over that whole idea around people grabbing 50 gotchis, 30 gotchis, and not really using them actively and tying up rentals that could potentially be picked up by someone else that's going to be channeling with them. But that's something that was going on for a while. Are people still seeing a lot of that happening? I'm kind of curious to know. There was also an idea of per parcel. So how many parcels you have, that's how many gotchis you'd be allowed to borrow. So I have 14 parcels. I'll be able to borrow 14 gotchis.
Can you guys hear me now or no?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm on. For some reason, like phone is much better for Discord than being on the laptop, I think. So hopefully it's smoother. So I'm trying everything here.
Oh yeah, no, it's good.
All right,
I'm hearing you
now. Cool.
What's your take on setting limits? I mean, we've reverted back now to unlimited, but I think the underlying issue with this is tying up more gotchis in a wallet than are actually being utilized, and potentially we don't know this 100%, but maybe some people being malicious with it and tying up gotchis so other people can't rent them. But I'm not really sure about that one. I've heard it being talked about. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, my take is, I mean, theoretically, there's no difference for a botter, and it's like a little bit extra effort for them to basically have to manage a bunch of other like child wallets for the botting process. Whereas with right now with unlimited, they can just set their script and it can go all day and it can like pick up as many gotchas as they need for whatever they're trying to do. With the new way, they have to have a bunch of like addresses that they use for that purpose, and something that I think they're fairly used to doing, as we've seen with the Gotchiverse. So I wouldn't say there's a huge difference between the two, and we haven't really seen. It's very hard to tell which wallets are a bot and which ones are not a bot without doing on-chain analysis of each one. That's just not something we have been having like bandwidth to do right now. So if the community wants to help out with that process, that would be great. But theoretically speaking, there's no huge difference for like a botter versus for having like the unlimited way and the one Gotchi per address way. But that's different. There's been a lot of more anecdotal evidence of the difference. That's what I'm kind of also interested in hearing from people is there a difference in how many gotchis you can lend out with the unlimited versus the limited way? Is anyone talking?
Sorry, I've been trying. I'm not really sure what's going on here. But now I'm not echoing, but your voice is echoing over itself. So it's interesting. This was happening the other day. There was nothing I could do about it, so I'm just gonna try and I'm just gonna cope with that.
GM friends.
GM.
I want to answer, I guess, the question in terms of borrowers. Just anecdotally, I've had more clients come to me that say, like near the end of the reset, like right before the reset, prior to the reversion back in the rule, that would say that their gotchis weren't getting rented, so they would just whitelist me because they weren't able to get them out. This is once again just anecdotally, just here and there I was hearing that, but overwhelmingly from most of my small friends in the community, they said they liked the change because they were actually able to get gotchis at the reset.
And the change was live for how many days? Like 4 or 5 days. So if the botters wanted to update their script, they probably had time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the change, like I said before, it wasn't like, it's just a timing kind of thing that affected it. If we were to do it like parcels plus 1 or even 10, it would make a huge difference for like, very niche use case players like me and maybe Zico. I don't know how Ragnar is doing it, but I guess he all of his rentals are whitelist at this point. But anything helps. If we go back to the reverted rule, I mean to the changed rule, and that helps the little player, that works for me. I'll figure out a way.
Yeah, Mycelium's asking, what's the best way to get
You cut out there, Dan. Last bit.
You can run those and do a script with that. Oh man, you guys keep going then.
Cyber Dan is back.
Fucking Discord rug.
Yeah. Getting rugged today, but that's okay. I think you guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear. Coder Dan got cut off there a little bit.
He can stay persistent, sir. You'll find a way. Okay, so with this setting limits on the number of borrowed gotchis, no future. Your take is it would be inconvenience to you, but also you see the other side of it, where a lot of other asset owners were finding it easier to get gotchis around reset. Is that kind of what you were just saying?
Yeah, like just for context, because like the numbers get all flimsy sometimes when I'm thinking about it. At this point, I have 100 gotchis that are on my whitelist. So when it affects my rentals, like when I say I have 150 gotchis, it's not that I rented 150 gotchis. It'll only affect those last rentals, which basically at the point of the reset. I can still channel all day because there are gotchis all available. I just like this morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I borrowed like 15, 20 gotchis that would expire right after the reset. They were just up. Some of them were 0.1 rentals that would pay like 1.6 ghost if you channel on a level 2. Those kind of rentals will go away in the sense that I wouldn't be able to grab a whole bunch of them up front. But like once again, this only really affects me, so it's not like a whole rule change. Shouldn't be like, you know, if it's better for the little player, then that's what we need to think about ultimately for the health of the game.
Does this increase the available supply of gotchis in general that are available for renting? I think it does, right? By setting a limit.
I don't know if it increases the supply because I was talking to Liz Lele about this, and if you go on Adventure.io when it's working, there are like hundreds of listings that are just not profitable gotchis. So there are tons of listings. There's just not a ton that are profitable, and then the ones that are profitable, if they're like really profitable, the bots will snag all of them at once, especially on those turn of hours. Like if you look at every turn of hour, that's an even number of hours away from the reset. So we're talking 12 hours before the reset, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and even on 1. But generally on those even numbered turn of hours, if you look at Adventure.io right at the turn of the hour, you're going to see that there's like 50 listings that are like 0.1 that'll expire right at the turn. So those listings kind of lose their, I guess whoever lists like that loses their ability to list like that. And then the people who want to grab those listings can't grab them in advance. That's really the only difference.
Yeah, see, drilling down, I'm trying to look for where like the problem is, right? I'm looking at what Mikey J is also seeing. It doesn't seem like there's a really obvious kind of issue with the way it is right now, because like you said, a lot of those rentals based on the current Alchemica prices are not profitable, so people are choosing to not play the market, I guess, and try and get these gotchis out, rented out, for what seems like an appealing price, an appealing profit. So I don't know. Do you think the market could potentially correct itself over time? Just these people will have to eventually list it so people do rent their gotchis, right? Or else they just sit there, or the Alchemica price appreciates in a way that's favorable to those rentals.
Yeah, see, the way I like to think about it, like when I was looking at the market, like yesterday's a good example. I know that Adventure.io went, there was issues with the subgraph, but I had been helping somebody move all day. And like right before the reset, like I had my laptop out. We were in a drive-through line at Burger King, 10 minutes before the reset. And I went in and there were like 100 rentals that were 0.3 ghosts that if you channeled on a level 2, you would receive 100% profit off of that channel. And they were just sitting there. So, I start grabbing them. I grabbed like in 10 minutes, I grabbed like 30 or 40 of them. This, I wonder, like, because a lot of those rentals, like if you look at the rentals, like those 0.1s, what most people are doing is they're filtering for right at the reset. They want to grab a gotchi and channel right now. If you were to turn off the filters for when, like if a gotchi is profitable or the duration is like, oh, this gotchi is channelable now, or like within the period of its rental, you can see that there are players who list these 0.1 rentals like hours in advance. And then once it hits that time where it's going to be 10 hours away from the reset, it can go in and like add a lot of you'll get a whole bunch of like profitable channels if you're watching Adventure.io at that point. I wonder though, like the number of players, because like I said, anecdotally, a lot of small players were like, at the reset, I can now get a gotchi, which is great, but that just tells me that they're all front running the same strategy of trying to rent a gotchi at the reset, which is the worst strategy in the game if everyone is front running and trying to do that. So I think it's worked from what I've heard. Like I've had a lot of people DM me that are little players and they're like, yo friend, this is working. And I appreciate the feedback because that's how we build things better. I don't know though if it's really like are there more rentals now available? Is it that like, because I know renters were also like, if you did a long-term rental while we were in that change, I was messing up all the long-term rentals. If your long-term rental costs 2 ghosts and in 6, rents, it pays like 3 ghosts. If I can channel, get my profit and cover the cost, like in one, for some of these, it was like, 0.5 ghost, you channel twice and you get, a profit of 0.75. So I would just channel once and send it back to you because I can't hold on to it long enough. So it just affected the way I rented, and I guess affected the way people handled the rental market. I don't know if I don't know how we can observe evidence though to show, like, is there a way to see how long a player is in the Gotchiverse when they channel? I guess like even botters have to go into the Gotchiverse. You can't just interact with the smart contract to get your UBI. So it's really hard to see, like what's the ideal thing. But I was talking to a friend who's a gamer like outside of this, and he was just confirming yesterday. He's like, you're fighting an endless war. You're going to be fighting a war against bots forever because they're just going to keep evolving. This is a tale as old as Web 2.
That is so true. It's always been an ongoing war. The only difference here is there's real money involved, and that's the only difference. I think that's why we get the level of engagement we get a lot of the time with these sorts of things. Traditional Web 2 games had botting, but I think a lot of times, sometimes it got overlooked because it didn't really affect anyone's bags. It just made just a poor, just a crappier gameplay experience. I totally agree with that.
I will say something though, because Dan makes a good point. He says, "Yep, the only way to really make botters hurt would be to reduce the base from 1 to 0. So they would have to at least own land, but that's not necessarily the best solution either." So I did talk with some people last week, and we mentioned it during one of my streams that the humble prices were pumping while reasonables kind of stood still. And I was like, I think this is the botters adjusting, because if they have land, they can at least get in. And, like if we were leaning towards, talking about land +1 or number of gotchis that you can get for to channel based on your land. So I wonder if some of that pump in the minor pump, the volume that we saw in the humbles was due to botters buying land, because that was going to be the only way they can really play the game.
So view or 1,000.
Well, I guarantee that's a way to have gameplay, and if you mess up the rules of bot killing, then you're eliminated from the squad.
I love that you have ethics already developing for murdering bots.
There's a whole system developing.
There's going to be a bot humanitarian task force or something eventually in the DAO. We're going to have to vote on it. Like, how are we treating liquidators? Is this the right way?
Now that you can talk in the verse, I mean, I can just come up to you, and if you can't talk to me regularly, if I ask you a question, I'm like, execute you.
Yeah. Hefe, I know Coder Dan is off the stage. You guys actually have a Miro board and a whole agenda, so I don't want to pull us too far into this. So I'm gonna step down. If anybody has to raise their hand, just ping me and I can bring you up.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. So that's old business stuff right there. Please comment on it. Check out the thread. Give your opinions. I'm not a huge. Well, I guess it does affect me. So I'll probably look at that again and provide my feedback. But definitely consider some of the other limitation options, because there does seem to be some anecdotal evidence from our friends saying that things are actually improving with that little trial run that we did. So definitely consider that, and we can revisit that if people want. So. And then Coder Dan, I see you put that up, work in progress. We're also thinking of naming conventions around the whole console cartridge model. If you think there's some better naming convention that would be more user-friendly or more appealing, or appeal to the concept of what we're trying to do with that better, definitely hop in and provide your insights with better naming conventions if you think there is, in terms of a pass or whatever you might be thinking of. So, new business. I see there's some new business stuff in here. I'll go through and address it. We also have a special guest. We have Je suis Fatigue. I guess we'll give you some time there on stage if you'd like, and you can run through kind of what you're doing. But the first three things here we'll look at with new business. I guess someone had posted a sig prop without any discussion thread, and so try and take another run at it. Create an idea in the forum, get some discussion around it, and if it gets some traction, we get peeps talking about it, we'll bring it up here on stage and we'll run through your idea there. And that was the change to level 8 and level 9 altars. To be honest, I didn't read it, but if you can start a discussion thread on it, we can start having a conversation around that. How to throw a curveball. I see. I want to get Dan's sentiment on this. If you are able to speak on it, feel free to speak on it. This is just a post Moon had put up as an idea, so just something to think about and provide feedback on. Nothing actionable on that in any way, but just an interesting post. Definitely go look at that. The post is called "Turning Off the Ghost Bonding Curve." Very probably controversial, but go read it. It's quite a deep, lengthy post. And then I think we should get some more discussion around it before we again bring that up and actually start debating it. But really interesting post. If Coder Dan, you have seen that post with turning off the bonding curve, if you want to provide your any insight on it, you feel free to do that. I don't know. I think, yeah. If you're able to,
I'm here. I'm just trying to speak.
Yeah.
Don't
I
have
can hear you.
any. Yeah, it's gonna go in and out. I don't have any comments at the moment, but I'll be watching the discussion for sure, and I'll chime in the DAO discussion forum if there's anything specific to go over.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the right idea there. So definitely go participate, give your feedback on that. There's a hackathon going on right now. We can touch on that near the end as well. We got Je suis Fatigue in the audience. Do you want to come up and spend maybe 5 minutes or so and explain kind of what you're doing? Little pitch. It's up to you, friend. I can definitely let you up. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
GM.
Thanks for having me up here. It might not be that useful with Dan being unable to speak, but yeah, I was just hoping to ask some questions from the perspective of a new dev in the space about the new SDK that's being developed. Yeah, I don't know if I can fire away. I don't know if you want to take
fire away, sir. The stage is yours here.
So I thought I'd just touch on what I understand an SDK to be from my game developing experience. So I understand it to be like an environment where you can access the tools or similar tools that were used to make the product you're using. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think the way Dan explained the SDK was it would allow for scripting, and I think that would be done in probably TypeScript on your parcel. So you'd be able to run scripts on objects, or I think you even mentioned creating objects on your parcel. That's going to be like level 1 of the SDK. But I think the later implementations are also going to include the NPC dApps and all the other features of the SDK will come with like subsequent updates.
Cool. Yeah, I guess that kind of touches on whether this is going to be something that requires someone to write code or whether it's more like a modular package that you can kind of assemble to create contract experiences.
Yeah, I think V1 is going to be very much you're going to need some scripting skills, abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then subsequent variations. The move hopefully is to go to a more modular style where you don't need very much, if any, coding experience to put things to play with elements on your parcel or integrate elements.
Okay, so you mentioned TypeScript. So does that mean you? I guess is there going to be Solidity integration into like Gotchiverse NPCs, where it's uh, outside contracts or using the project's contract?
That's a good question, Coder Dan. I'm not sure on that one there. Coder Dan has stated the SDK will have in-game scripting features and JS
Yep.
components you can link with on-chain and off-chain data.
Mm,
And then there won't be much of a GUI, like you said. Like I said, you'll have to have some scripting experience.
yeah.
But if you have a scripting GUI, that would be cool.
Yeah, I was hearing loads of buzzwords like the new UI 2.0, and I was wondering whether it was related.
Yeah. And then he does say he did follow up on your question. Solidity would be used if you want to write a smart contract, but otherwise it'll be mostly JS and TypeScript.
Oh, nice. So fairly easy to get into. So like for example, my web app at the moment, it doesn't write or it doesn't have any sort of contract behind it. So that sounds like an easy stepping stone. Not really having to learn Solidity as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
is
So go ahead. So maybe
hang
you
on.
can get into kind of what you're working on, and I know you, if you would like to, and then
Yeah.
if you have any other questions regarding how the DAO could maybe help your project or whatever you need, really.
Mm, well, I did just want to have like one last question about the SDK
Oh,
and
absolutely.
whether NPCs in the Gotchiverse might be able to facilitate having a phaser-free game engine window tied to parcels that could open
Oh,
up
interesting.
like the ecosystem mini games, which could become like a arcade district DAO that you visit and play games at. I was wondering if this is like a stepping stone to um, quite unique user experiences.
I'm liking all your ideas. I definitely think it would lead to unique user experiences. Coder dancing external links are tricky, but
Mm,
there'll be some level of support for external links.
so cool. Yeah, I'll cover a bit about what I've been doing with Gotchi Dash, trying to keep it free access for everyone, a hub for ecosystem links, um, your all of your assets pulled in and prices, and your harvest data, although don't rely on it right now because it's bugged. Um, oh God, I'm trying to include everything that people kind of require on a daily basis on one page, but I'm forgetting a lot and missing a lot. There are no tickets at the moment. I prioritize harvest data. I'm hoping to keep it free forever and include guild ads soon or ecosystem ads of any kind, and hopefully writing a contract to handle that so people can just queue them and I can approve them or send them away again.
That's very
Um,
cool. I know we
yeah,
talked about this for a little while in the
yeah.
DMs, and you're trying to make something a little bit different. It seems like compared to what's out there. I mean, we do have quite a few. We have a few dashboards now that provide data analytics and that sort of thing. But it seems like you're trying to do something a bit different in terms of being more of like the I think the way you described it was like an agnostic hub for.
Well, I think that's the way you described it. So.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Okay. Maybe it was me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I stole that from
That's
you.
the way it kind of seems like what you're doing there with the, it's not really built towards any one specific purpose. You're just tying everything into your UI, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the apps out there at the moment are being built primarily towards guilds and I guess more hardcore users, whereas someone just getting into the Gotchiverse doesn't really have like a page they can hang out on to feel comfortable in and access everything from. Yeah. Just trying to, I think someone actually said after looking at all of their assets in one place, it actually made them want to ape into the project more.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And if you guys are on the Miro board there, actually, can you drop a link to the Gotchi Dash? I guess it's just
Oh, yes.
gotchi-dash.com, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that didn't hyperlink, sorry guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So check that out. I like the layout of it. It's quite nice.
But it is slightly broken until the graph is fixed.
What level
You're
of
not
coding
farming
experience do you
well right
have?
now.
Are you like a coder by day or like a programmer by day, or you have this as a hobby?
No, I'm unemployed and I started learning how to code TypeScript about like 5 or 6 months ago now, trying to make a mini game initially, which I soon gave up on. And then just started pretty much working on Gotchi Dash every day. Released it maybe a month ago, and it's had some pretty positive responses. So thanks everyone. Yeah, just a little bit. No
Well,
future.
we all belong to the club, my friend. So awesome. That's awesome that you're doing that,
Yeah.
and really cool to see other coders, other programmers taking this up on their own and building tools for a community.
Yeah, and hopefully it just becomes more and more accessible. And it sounds like it is, which is sick. Like there's already so many apps in the background that keep popping up on my Twitter feed that I've just never even heard of before, but they're just already so well developed.
Yeah, I know a lot of great tools, but I appreciate your effort here, sir. If
Cheers
there's
for having me
anything,
up.
of course, if there's any way the DAO can help you, if you need something specific from us, always feel free to ask. So
Yeah, you can get around to accepting my funding bid if you like.
yeah, have you submitted a proposal to the DTF?
Huh?
Have you submitted a proposal to the DTF?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a
But
great
I
start.
think everything's been pretty busy. I've seen Wagme's put out some pretty hardcore snapshot posts recently, so
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate
Cheers.
you up here. Yeah. Cheers.
Au revoir.
All right. And so that was just Sweet Fatigue, community builder. I know Mikey J's in the audience. I know you wanted a couple minutes, sir. We were talking about proxy voting last week. And we have some new business that we could talk about if you guys are up to it. But I'd like to see if I can get Mikey J up here on stage. We can touch on proxy voting from last week. I'll get you up here.
Hey, GM.
GM, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me up. I know this was discussed a lot last week, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there live. I did listen to the recording, and I had some new thoughts on it this week that I posted that I just kind of wanted to bring up and kind of maybe try and reframe the conversation a little bit. So initially, I sort of brought up this idea almost 2 months ago now. That I was getting a little bit concerned just seeing the way that, to me, it seemed there was sort of a concentration of voting power that was taking place that maybe is not an issue today, but in the future could show how such a concentration of voting power could be used in a negative way in the future, in something like a Sybil attack or in some other scenario. So I was listening to the conversation from last week, and it really, started to dawn on me that initially, my thought was, hey, like delegation is not necessarily a positive thing. If we naturally there's a way for the protocol to distribute assets in a way that's not concentrated, and if voting power just as accurately and purely reflects asset ownership as possible, we really wouldn't have any issue with voting power concentration. And that was kind of my initial thought. But the more I thought about it, it just seems that when you start to think about the implementation of how to sort of, in a way, ban proxy voting or ban delegation, when you start to break down the details, it's just not really, it doesn't really seem feasible to do. And I think the big issue is that, when someone, deposits an asset in a smart contract, of course, we can look at an example like the vault, and it's relatively straightforward. I think everyone can kind of agree on who owns the asset. However, I think if we imagine all the future use cases for putting assets in smart contracts, there's just too many things for us to kind of imagine, and for the DAO to decide, who is the owner of that asset in the contract. And kind of the conclusion I sort of came to this week was, the blockchain already does that for us. If once an asset's in a smart contract, it's essentially owned for all intents and purposes by whoever holds the keys for that smart contract, right? And while the person who put it in there may not see it that way, for an external party, that's really the only fair conclusion you can come to. You can imagine a number of use cases where the owner of that asset, while it's in the smart contract, may not be entirely clear. And as far as I can see, it's not really up to the DAO to try and suss out, who a quote unquote true owner is. So, I think all that sort of led me to this conclusion that basically, if you really can't fairly and reasonably prevent or ban kind of delegation, then to me, then the flip side is, well, how can we open up delegation, and how can we open up proxy voting and make it accessible to everyone, including the protocols that build on top of Aavegotchi. So right now, for example, today, if I want to build, something that's custodial for asset owners to deposit assets into, I really don't have a good option to give voting power back to those individuals. Probably what anyone would do was exactly, kind of what the vault did. You could think of maybe some ways you could make it a little different, but my thinking is okay, let's start from what if we were to start from an assumption that proxy voting delegation is something that is simply unavoidable. So then my next question would be, how do we make it something that is flexible and accessible to everyone? And Hefe, I think it was you. I thought it was you who just very mentioned in passing an idea about sort of tokenized voting, almost like governance tokens issued on a per vote basis, and that you would basically then receive those tokens, and then you could either transfer them to somebody else or vote with them yourself in that vote. And that when I heard that kind of perked my ears up, because it seems like a system like that could solve a number of problems. One problem is if you pull voting power, right now in the vault vote, I'm sorry to just bring it back to the vault, but it's the only example we have right now. But like, as an example, when the vault votes, they can sort of split their vote, but they can't really split their vote very flexibly. They can't say, okay, we're going to go 67% towards this and 33% towards this, because that's how our asset owners voted, or anything like that. So the ability to be able to split among multiple choices in sort of a ranked choice voting option is interesting to me. And also just the ability to then subdivide up voting power and distribute it to either, a group of people is interesting as well. So if someone, say, wanted to start a vault competitor and do voting a little differently, they could say, receive that voting power and then distribute that voting power directly back to the asset owners. So that's just an example. It's like, how do we give protocols to build on top of Aavegotchi the tools and flexibility to be able to use voting power in more creative ways than they can today? And by doing so, we might create an environment of more competition which could lead to just voting power being, exercised in ways that is maybe a little bit more in the spirit of asset ownership in the future. So that was kind of my thought, and I was just hoping to meet that maybe in the coming days, if anyone has ideas about, that type of token, per vote or some system like that might, provide a voting system where the votes can be, subdivided and transferred as easily as a token could be. That could be something that I think could be interesting. So I was hoping to maybe hear if anyone had any ideas about how something like that might work, or what the technical hurdles might be, and whether that might be a direction we could, think about.
I was gonna say I was thinking about the voting power and proxy stuff over the past week, and I kind of reached a similar thought on what you're saying, in that, like, if we open delegation up to everyone, make it easy for anyone to delegate their vote, then this issue might not be as big of an issue, because then Gotchi Gang might just move their delegation away from the Gotchi vault and into something else. Also, there are some non-custodial services coming up that will allow you to do a lot of what the Gotchi vault's doing without having to deposit your assets into smart contracts. This leads to my follow-up question for you, Mikey J. If we're using a smart contract and the smart contract is the set lending operator, voting power does not transfer to the contract because it's non-custodial. Would you, and you were saying earlier, if we were looking at that smart contract, outsider, they would say, oh, this person owns those assets. If we know that the smart contract actually isn't taking custody, would we view that contract the same way, since it doesn't have the voting power and delegation, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that in that case, I mean, we have the advantage of, protocol, Aavegotchi protocol level things like lending operator and pet operator, that are accessible. But eventually, you're going to have use cases where there's going to be no way around providing, where there's going to be, you're not always going to be able to do everything in a non-custodial way. Another thing you might think about is like contracts where someone's providing collateral. Maybe there's a lending protocol where you can provide your Gotchi as collateral. This is kind of what I'm getting into, is like, okay, now we have to figure out who's the owner of that collateral while it's in progress. Is that maybe the lending protocol uses that collateral to earn yield for the protocol while it's being used as collateral. So like, okay, so who owns it at that moment? That's kind of the tricky thing. But it definitely is many things we can have at the protocol level, like the way we have Gotchi lending at the protocol level, lending operator, pet operator, and more of those things we can have at the protocol level, of course, that doesn't require, custody of assets. But I think inevitably we're going to run into assets getting deposited in smart contracts for one reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, my idea, it seemed to me like, based on all the conversations we've been having, a potential solution could be, to completely separate the custodial ownership of the asset and the actual voting power the owner of the wallet with the assets has. The thing is, though, is if we were to do that, would it be a token? Because do you want to allot value to that voting power? And that would make things interesting if you could. But even if they were used as an off-chain or an on-chain metric like friends, but not necessarily a token, you would be able to transfer your voting power, delegate it to your guild, dedicate it to a Gotchi Gang member who, aligns with your values and you're okay with them voting on your behalf. I think it just shows it gives people a little bit more flexibility with how they're allotting their voting power, and makes delegation more of an open thing where anybody can delegate to any other entity within the Gotchiverse. Seems like I was just going to touch on district DAOs and sub DAOs. It seems like this would be kind of a natural evolution to allow flexibility for those things to work when they get implemented.
Yeah, for sure. And you just kind of touched on this a little bit, and I see some people commenting about like, look, I think the kind of it feels a little dirty, because it feels a little bit like making voting power so easily transferable is in a way kind of monetizing it. In a way, you're starting to create like governance Legos, instead of, you talk about like DeFi Legos. Here you're almost talking about composable governance, and you could argue whether or not that's a good thing. And personally, I actually would prefer to be in a world where that wasn't happening. But I think the truth is that it can already happen in the current system. Like I had also wrote an example in the DAO thread. What if I create a service, where I'm emptying your reservoirs every day or channeling your gotchis, and there's no fee, but the fee is basically I control your voting power. So in a way, I can already buy your voting power in some way. In a way, it kind of makes me feel dirty, because it's like, okay, do we really want voting power to be so easily transferable that you could essentially create liquidity for, voting on a particular topic, and, maybe people don't like that idea, and I don't particularly love the idea, but the truth is, and in a roundabout way, it can already happen today. So in a way, I'd rather have protocols who build on top of Aavegotchi, give them more flexibility on how to handle the voting power, so that at least you can create a market where there's a variety of options for asset owners to choose from, and you can let the market sort out how they value their voting power. And you hope the market would kind of gravitate towards using protocols that treated their voting power in a way that the market prefers.
I would love to see...
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to mention what Hardcore was saying. He's saying VP shouldn't be tokenized. You can delegate, but not permanently. I think what he means there is, the token is in question wouldn't be like an ERC20, but it would still have to represent those assets that owner has. So I wouldn't be able to take my, let's say I have 5,000 Ghost worth of voting power. I wouldn't be able to just sell all of that away to someone else as a token and not have now representation of my assets. There would still be voting power tied to those assets.
Couldn't you theoretically, though, rent out the voting power, like Mikey J say? Like, if it is tokenized and I have 10K Ghost voting power, and a player wants to, borrow that token for a few days, someone that I trust, and I send it to them, there could be a rental market. The other thing is the token idea. I could see. I kind of like it for one. It might be something that we can work towards that will help a lot of players. Because we recently pushed, the security thing where, hey, get a hardware wallet, move your assets away from the hot wallet. But if you want to vote, you got to break out the ledger. I'd prefer to keep the ledger in a safe and never touch it. So if there's a way that I could delegate my voting power to my main hot wallet that I use when I'm in the Gotchi version, so I don't have to break out the ledger, that would be amazing. But it's also like a trivial little thing, wasting dev time on that where I could just plug in a ledger might not be worthwhile.
One idea.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the original thought was with sub-DAOs and capturing voting on chain. And so the idea I had was for sub-DAOs. So if there were, this idea was taken from an existing DAO, I forget the name of the DAO, that to do on-chain snapshots, they did this tokenized per vote idea. And for sub-DAOs, for the district, it kind of makes sense if the result of the vote is going to have an on-chain result. So I don't know about existing DAO votes that use the snapshot, but I was thinking more on the migration of sub-DAOs and doing all on-chain. So there would have to be a way of capturing the snapshot on-chain if we want on-chain results. And so this tokenization per vote is just one strategy. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I think that's maybe the point that some of the people in the chat have latched onto and others haven't, which is that this would be basically look, I don't know, I really haven't, aside from hearing Hefe talked about it, I haven't really thought, through all the details. That this is why I wanted to have this conversation. But the way I imagine it would work is, a vote, let's say a prop is created, you would go and you would claim your, a snapshot would be taken, I guess, when the prop is created, calculating everyone's voting power based on the wallet address. And then you would go and you would claim your voting tokens for that prop. And at that point, I guess you can burn them and vote, or you can transfer them to somebody else. And then that process happens for every vote. Once the vote's over, those tokens aren't useful for anything. So that would be the idea.
Like ballots, like voting ballots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike Kelly, I would say it is similar to the opt-out option the vault discussed, but ultimately what it is doing is it's giving options to the protocol. So the vault would have more options in terms of how it could exercise its voting power, or future vault competitors or other types of products we're not even imagining. It's basically just taking what's essentially already happening, which is voting power gets delegated by depositing your asset into another protocol that's built on top of Aavegotchi. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like, instead of trying to outlaw something, well, you legalize it and you make it safer and you make it more accessible or whatever. You try and make it so that you're basically giving the market to the tools to, if delegation is going to be a feature by default, then we may as well make sure it's a feature that has as much flexibility as possible so that we can have a market of different services that offer different types of ways that to exercise their voting power.
Mikey J, a very important point. And I wonder, sorry, Tommy, gotcha. I just want to throw this out and then you can jump in. We talk about delegation and there is like a negativity, a positivity to it, but I feel like eventually we are going to see DAO politicians in our DAO, right? How do people feel about that? Because delegation will come into effect when we have DAO politicians in our DAO kind of representing large groups of people. Is that something that we want in our Aavegotchi DAO?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great analogy, great time to bring up an analogy I recently heard on a podcast, Chainlink podcast, talking about DAOs. And this guy, he compared DAOs to almost like the Earth. So you have like the core of the Earth, it's like the center. You might have very engaged group like DAO members engaged in that little center, and then you have like the mantle, and you have members who are engaged in the discussion around the DAO, but maybe not necessarily directly involved with the DAO decision making. And then you have the crust, and the crust could be like 100,000 people, and they're just part of the DAO, but they maybe necessarily don't participate in governance. So I could see those folks on the outside part of it, like the crust people, they could most likely delegate their power, or will most likely delegate their power if they can, to someone who they feel is going to be representing their concerns and issues, in the DAO, those mantle members and the core members, Yeah, and no shot at the crust people. I mean, those, I'm just referring to the people on the outer edges of participation in the DAO that are the voting power holders, but not necessarily utilizing their voting power really well right now.
Well, one thought that was brought up about key down and bribing and all that kind of good stuff. So I think it's very positive if kind of the bribing mechanism as being a derivative product could occur with tokenization of votes, because I think that would just bring more value to the underlining Aavegotchi assets that provide that voting power. So I think it's positive for maintaining value or even upward pressure. And then second is to address something that Dr. Wagner said about worried about making voting much more difficult, having to claim tokens every time and all that kind of stuff. And me right now in the throes of redoing my taxes and having 20,000 plus transactions and all that kind of stuff is cumbersome. We could not do an ERC20, but just have to do the analysis of how expensive it would be to capture the data on chain, but have it somewhat like Friends, where it's just a on-chain record, and then having helper methods that just you could transfer your allocation to someone or whatever, and there is no ERC20 tokens actually giving to you. So hopefully to not have taxable events of moving actual tokens around, but just having a on-chain record that's non-transferable except for a particular helper method, basically. So I think there's ways around it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I was envisioning it, and I think this might be pretty easy to implement at the smart contract level, but probably want Dan's input on that. But you have 10,000 ghost worth of voting power. You now have, sorry, and go over there and you would deposit the other half. And now you would have half in one pool where you actually believe in how you're going to be represented, and you're even going to take the other half and maybe you're going to essentially monetize it. Do you see anything wrong with something like that?
Well, also remember it's per vote. So, and your voting power is the snapshot of when the vote was created. So let's say there's 20 votes in the hopper, and you have 5,000 ghost voting power, then you have 5,000 for those 20 votes, and that you could transfer your voting power per vote to whoever you wanted to, that kind of thing. I think that's the important thing to remember, that it's per vote, and a snapshot needs to be captured per vote. Just, you want to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also wonder how much voting power based on our assets is actually being utilized in terms of a percentage. I don't have the data point, but it'd be interesting to know.
Well, that reminds me, I created a DAO thread on how to calculate voting power, like what are all the queries and stuff that are involved, so that we could kind of checks and balances with when the new WAP Ghost and liquidity pools come online. We can have a kind of a clearer idea of how someone could go and check all the queries and make sure it matches up with the snapshot. And Jared posted the snapshot queries, so I need to go through that and kind of diagnose that. But you have a good point in that it's very complicated to calculate your voting power, at least for me, for right now. I haven't dove into it because you have your liquidity pools, you have your ghosts, and you have your wearables, and so it kind of compounds. And
There's
so
a
having
lot.
having a clear way to figure out what your voting power is, so that you can check it against snapshot just to make sure, I think is very important. And with this new way of tokenizing per vote, it'll be very easy to see, because all the queries are right there. Yeah, thanks, Hardcore.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I think we should keep having a conversation around this, because it's we're gonna get to a point where we do have something comprehensive that we can maybe have if the community's in agreement with, we can have something actionable we can implement at some point, because we're going to see the evolution of the DAO. So we should have these conversations as the DAO is evolving, because we're going to be moving towards eventually district DAOs, sub DAOs, and almost a fragmentation of the DAO that we have now, multiple parts representing the DAO now. And so, I think having conversations around increased flexibility is going to be always welcomed, like as we're growing as a DAO. Mikey J, thank you for sharing your kind of input on that. I definitely kind of share your sentiment of creating more flexibility as far as delegation goes. And I'll keep participating in that forum too, and if we can come up with some concrete solution to have this voting power represented in a way where it would be transferable and still maintaining our security as a DAO, we should definitely keep drilling in on that. Do you have any last thoughts, Mikey J, or anyone else here up on stage right now in regards to proxy voting?
Last thing I would say, and just to keep the conversation going throughout the week, I'm not a student of crypto governance systems, and I know there's a lot of people here who maybe know a lot more about this kind of stuff. So, if anyone else has participated in other protocols that have, this kind of similar system that we've been talking about today, if you just feel free to take the reins and, throw in your 2 cents and participate in the thread. So maybe we can sort of come up with a system with some more concrete details, so we can have another discussion around it once we have a more concrete idea of what this kind of system might look like and what it might mean.
Yeah,
And
well,
I still throw it out there for district sub-DAOs. Be a great kind of proving ground.
yeah, I agree. That'd be great proving ground for sure. Coder Dan, in my opinion, Shidao's bribing system makes good sense for a pure DeFi protocol, but isn't necessarily right for a DAO focused on game mechanics. Okay.
Coder Dan, when you say for game mechanics, this might be a lot to type for you because the whole communication issues. But what would be the downside of a bribing kind of system brought into a game, game mechanics focused DAO? Like, what would be the downsides? Just because I don't necessarily understand what could go wrong. Dr. Wagme, there is somebody with 50 milks. I don't know if they're trying to make it. Okay, so yeah, that makes perfect sense. So if we wanted to make a unilateral decision or something like some big change to affect just part of the game for certain players to break the balance, this could be a side effect. This could happen if we gamified.
Yeah, there could be some crazy adjustments, but also as a DAO, we also have like multiple layers of screening. Like, if some suggestions BS, we don't even bother talking about it up here. We briefly mention it sometimes, then go over it, unless it's worth talking about.
Well, this brings up a point of limited context or limited effect. So sub-DAOs would have a very limited effect on game mechanics because it would only be only in the DAO, the district that the DAO represents. Now, that's why I think it would be a great proving ground. I think talking about it from a Aavegotchi DAO perspective, I think is a bit too much. It's like a bridge too far. And the checks and balances are super important that we have in place currently. Whereas, there's a SIP prop, core prop, and then Pixelcraft needs to do some work, and there's a lot of gates in the chain. But sub-DAOs, if we want it to be on chain, I think tokenization is a strategy to look at.
Yeah, and also Dan makes a good point. Once everything's on chain, we'll have to worry about 51% attacks. We still very much have this human element in our DAO where we can talk about things and debate if something's even worth moving forward on. In the past, there have been SIG props that have been people have put up without any discussion and tried to have unreasonable suggestions to what we could do in the game. And oftentimes we briefly discuss it and then move on. So we still have that ability. We can always exercise that ability if we as a DAO feel like something that was pushed through as a SIG prop without any discussion or reasonable debate was, shouldn't be implemented. So we still have that filter. And then so until the smart contract fully on chain implementation, we can still exercise that in addition to our voting power. And also, I will say a good debate and making some great points is of swaying voting power in itself. In the DAO, if you're able to create an argument that's strong enough that's able to actually change someone's opinion on their state of opinion on a specific topic. That in itself, in my opinion, is worth voting power, through just dialogue. It's kind of an intangible, completely intangible, but something I consider as well. Yeah. And so I also put up an article there, Chainlink blog article on DAOs and Web3 governance. It's a nice, well put together article on kind of what we're talking about, and talking about governance in general. So yeah, that's something to have a look at there. If we don't have anything else to touch on right now for governance, we could talk about potentially eye traits. I don't know. Do we have time for that? I guess we're over our hour now. I would have liked to talk about it, but depends if you guys want to touch on that.
Let's touch on it. Let's
Okay.
go.
All right. Let's hardcore drop the Miro board you've been working on for eye traits, because I know you got a whole separate one for this. And I'll get the thread here for that as well. It's been a pretty good discussion. I've been kind of just reading along and offering a few insights. Thank you, sir. And the eye traits, we have discussed in great length all the other traits. There was like a very deep discussion around that, and we do have some consensus around what the other 4 traits are. Eye traits are still very much unknown. And so we kind of should talk about this as a DAO and look at what was proposed initially, and also now what we could potentially implement. And there are a few different good solutions that people have put forward. Some have more utility, some have more aesthetic appearance. I think the sentiment from Dan in general was, with eyes, they are a trait based on rarity, but also it is some sort of a flex. And so having rare eyes, the value of rare eyes is speculative, has been speculative based on the scarcity of the actual eye trait. And so that's the current I guess you want to call it like value people are attributing to that. But the one issue I had with the just purely visual flex aspect was the eyes aren't necessarily represented very well in the Gotchiverse, just with the nature of how the gameplay is. Zoomed out 25-30%, you can no longer actually tell any visual difference apart from color with the eye shapes, and it would be cool for them to be a little represented a little bit better. I know we also have some peeps who have put forward some great battle mechanics or utility mechanics for eye traits. So first, before we get into it, I guess, does anybody have anything to touch on specifically for what they think on eye traits? Anybody up here on stage? How you're generally thinking of it?
Well, it seems like there's been a lot of cool ideas, and in the aesthetic realm, and I definitely like the idea of not making them a power in the Gotchiverse. And so the laser eyes shooting out there as an aesthetic, or having them for mythical eyes, either color or shape, having it somewhat visible to other gotchis, no matter what kind of eye wearable is being worn, as kind of a flex. But keeping it in the flex realm makes complete sense to me.
I'd make the argument that we actually saw the first utility for double myth eyes in the last snapshot. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't the winner the first time the winner was determined by a gotchi that had that extra boost from the double myth eyes?
Yeah.
For BRS
Yep.
specifically.
Well, I think that one was that the BRS for 1 and 2 were very similar, and if they had the same wearables, then the myth eyes would have put it over the top, I think.
Yeah. The myth eyes really changed that, because you can see at the start BRS the difference, and then you can see how like being able to manipulate the other ones without being able to manipulate the eyes, so having those high eyes also, when you make that pull, those 2 eye traits are part of the 6 pulls, you know what I mean, that make up your gotchi. So I don't understand why they wouldn't have any utility really, or any, any part of the game, I mean, at least increase what your, weapons do and different things like that, at least, or different things like that, right?
Yeah, I can highlight some of the ideas that kind of jumped out. That was interesting to see with rarity farming, to see that the double myth eyes pushed that gotchi just past where the other one wasn't able to quite reach because of that. And that was pretty interesting. But in regards to like gameplay, there were there's 2 like main arguments, and then there's different suggestions underneath each one. The 2 arguments are adding utility that is kind of like a soft utility in the gotchiverse and wouldn't necessarily be directly related to PvP. And then the other one was purely aesthetic, but improve the actual aesthetics in the gotchiverse for representation of the different eye types.
I definitely think the eyes should matter a little more than not, just
Mhm.
because it's part of the original poll, it's part of the whole gotchi. If it doesn't do anything like with the PvP or whatever, I think it should at least increase what you hold. You know what I mean? So I mean, it can like boost things, change things up. You know what I mean? Depending on where it's at,
Yeah.
maybe.
We also have to think of the meta, where the meta for the other 4 traits is going to be quite flexible in terms of your XP. I believe for each XP level that you've achieved, you're going to be able to get 3 points, in-game points, towards your modifying your traits. That might change, but I think that's the way I heard Coder Dan say it before. So all those traits are going to be fairly modular, and especially if we get respec potions, if we get the respec potions, we can see a lot more flexibility in the meta of the 4 traits. As gameplay evolves, people will be able to shift around their traits based on what the most ideal setup would be for that time. The eye traits, they won't change. So in my opinion, the eye traits should not necessarily be directly related to PvP. So in terms of like damage per second or increasing defense, I don't think those would be the most appropriate for the eye traits, only because it would extend maybe an unfair advantage to people who have high eye traits, and that advantage would be there to stay. Which, I mean, it could be interesting because you would see a huge revaluing of gotchis in the market based on probably certain specific eye traits. But I think in general, in terms of fairness and competition, avoiding PvP utility for eye traits would probably be favorable. Like, it would be ideal. But that's just my opinion. Uh, there's also no harm in implementing it during this testing phase because we are early. And if someone does have a good enough idea regarding PvP and we feel like it's worth testing, we're very much in an experimental phase for traits. And, I'd like to know what Coder Dan's input is on that. But, having a arena turned on for a week with some cool PvP traits for eyes might just give us a little bit more insight in how that would work. How fair or unfair it would actually be with the advantages, and would it really make a difference in PvP? That would give us a little bit more data on that. And so I don't have like a fully fleshed out opinion on it. I'm just speculating that maybe immutable traits might not be the best for PvP, because PvP traditionally has a changing meta. Some games it changes a lot slower. Other games like with Axie Infinity, the meta would change every couple weeks. So it's like you always had to reskill, rebuild your teams, and you're constantly shuffling around trying to figure out what the best where people aren't looking and where you can gain that advantage. That's part of it. So um, there was also a mention of quests and how quests could be implemented around different eye types in the grid. But that's a later game mechanic that could be implemented, which is another thing to add for eyes. Is that you could really layer on the use cases for eyes. You could start with a more general use case that's maybe not directly related to gameplay and is purely aesthetic, and then always add additional utility as we see fit. That could also be another place to start off. Let me just read some of these comments. Hardcore, we can do eye color as sprint trail color, eye shape as the pattern. And that was the suggestion I'd put out also, or someone had, and I agreed with them. I think I'm a huge fan of that. You're increasing the visibility of the gachi, and you're also increasing that flex related to the eyes. You might see for the more rare eye types might have a more aesthetically appealing trail with pattern kind of thing, and it would be the trail with the pattern that would be desired in the gachiverse while you see people running around, because the eyes are not that noticeable, so they would just be represented a different way.
Well, I like the suggestion somewhat of changing the gachi glow. If you have a double myth, maybe it looks like a flame and it uses the mythical color. That would be pretty cool flex.
Oh, I guess that's a third thing to consider is, do we want something kind of special and exclusive for double myth eyes, either in terms of a visual flex or in terms of specific gameplay? Is there a feeling towards double, because I mean the market's valued it that way, but is there a feeling amongst the community that the double myth eyes, and I'll say I try to be neutral on it because I do own a double myth eyes, so not trying to be biased, but from in general, do people feel like the double myth eyes should have something kind of special? That's been mentioned many times, right? So
Well, I can just imagine, if there's a gachi gang hangout in the gachi verse, and a gachi is like on fire, like it's their aura, and it's just like snapping and popping and all that kind of stuff. That would be just fucking bananas.
oh,
Question,
that would be
though,
cool.
would you enable that as an animation that could be turned off by the end user? Because imagine a person with a crap computer, a double myth-eye gachi walks on their, screen, and now their whole shit is lagging because they can't handle, the animations.
True.
Yeah, maybe it could be turned off with it could be the same toggle that they use for the Spirit Force, the glow aura.
Yeah, gachi glow.
Yeah, could be the same toggle for that. It's a good consideration. I like Moon's point as well, that the double myth eyes could potentially have, a very unique appearance because it's purely visual and it doesn't really affect gameplay. It's just a little bit of a flex for those eye types. And I'd like to know Coder Dan's opinion on this. If you have something like this, purely aesthetic, visual, but very exclusive at the top, you have this very small percentage of double myth eyes that, like you were saying, have this flame animation around them. would that in turn make the subsequent ones underneath that follow a specific pattern of value? Would now, like, the rare ones be, would the rare ones be valued a little closer to those double myth eyes, and then the uncommon a little bit close? Like, would those other eye types get it ordered in terms of value just because the double myth eye has this special ability, or would we have to add like scaled down aesthetic appeals to each tier of rarity? That's something I've been thinking about.
Well, how many double mythi gotchis are there?
I think there's less than 300. There's like 280 or something like that.
Do you know concentration of ownership? Because there's stat sites that could tell you, like, oh, your gotchi's a 1 of 1, or there are only this many. So I'm sure we can look at, number of wallets, like how many people actually own double mythi gotchis.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Because we do have some double mythi collectors. And I can't see on Fireball GG, unfortunately. I don't think they show the whole ownership array. They just show whatever's available on the bazaar. There might be another tool that I'm not thinking of here. And I know there's another place where you can look at 1 of 1s and more exclusive gotchis.
Yeah, I mean, I had a double mythi. It was a 1 of 2. I sold it during after season 2 to get more gotchis because I just didn't see, the utility in it. It's cool. It's a cool flex. And at the time that I pulled the H2 portal, it was actually during the GVM, like right after we got our prizes. And when I opened the portal, it was a 535 gotchi or this double mythi gotchi, which was like a 470. And everybody was like, the double mythi. So I grabbed it. And then afterward, I was like, I probably should have grabbed the 535. Functionally, it probably would have been a better play. But once we establish this, then that value it'll be easy to know.
Well, yeah, that's the question. So double myths are valued, and how is that value, speculation going to show up in the Gotchiverse? That's kind of what all we need to figure out. Because if we give a set value, Dan said this, if you give it some kind of functionality in the Gotchiverse that's not aesthetic, then that might actually hurt the value of double myths. But if it's a pure flex, then it should maintain the market for double myths.
So I guess let me ask, because double myths are unique in our ecosystem so far, because it's really one of the only assets where we determined the value. We all said, hey, we're speculatively giving this specific thing value in our market. If we decide to do that for another item, say we all decide that the legendary campfire is the real, the bee's knees, and we want it to do something cool, should we as a DAO be able to adjust stuff like that? Is that too far outside of the vision of Pixelcraft?
I think with their discretion, it should be, I feel like it should be allowed with their discretion, because they also have a vision and we don't want to like go too far off the path with the vision. But I see like there could be some lore with double mythis. It could be part of the storyline, specific gotchis. People might build their own quests, like we've seen with mini games, and have special abilities. So it doesn't really end, in my opinion. Even if we decided to give a low use case value to the double mythis and eyes in general, people will still build and find ways to integrate those. But we need to find out. I think the biggest thing with me, in my opinion, is the eye types are not really represented very well, or the eye colors actually are not even represented very well in like the Gotchiverse gameplay currently. So how can we? It is a flex, but how can we make it actually look like a flex? Because right now it doesn't really look like that.
Maybe you could do something where the Alchemica glimmers a little bit more when you have some kind of mythi.
Also, Johnny C321 said something that I thought was kind of cool. Could they give combat bonus against just liquidators? So when we're in battle with liquidators, maybe the double mythis can do something of value against these free-to-play players versus against other players. Like they're only OP, really OP against these players who are using burnable NFTs.
That's interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting. And I guess allows for those to be valued a bit differently. An interesting kind of example is for something that had no utility whatsoever but became very valuable in a game was in old school RuneScape. They had party hats, and it was literally just like this one event that happened, or I guess it was an event that happened, and you could get this like firecracker, and you would open it, and one of the prizes you could get was a party hat. And like it literally looks like, I don't know if anybody has a picture of it, but it literally looks like just a basic looking hat that someone drew, and there was different colors you could get, but there were specific ones that went for like millions of like the in-game currency. Like they became very valuable in the game, and they literally had no utility besides being a party hat, but it was like
That's
a
funny.
flex. It was like such a flex to see someone walking down in the game, or walking around in like the wilderness of the game, and have like a party hat. You're like, oh shit, that guy's an OG. Like he has a freaking party hat.
Well,
You know?
one thing it kind of comes up is quests are maybe in like loot boxes that are dropped in the Gotchiverse that only double myths could either open the loot box or go on these particular quests. That would bring essentially value to double myths without giving them some superpower, something of that nature. So I think there's ways of giving double myths value without essentially game behavior modifications.
Well, they are eyes. Seeing better is one of the things that could be part of the game. Seeing all the alchemica, a little better. Seeing like treasure boxes a little easier, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean the cap on a flex is pretty much unlimited in terms of how much people want to speculate on it. That's the thing. If you start implementing more utility based on gameplay, it's a little easier to quantify it, and that might actually tether its value closer to what people think. Whereas you have the other downside of the aesthetic appeal of just making it purely aesthetic is you will make the higher eye types more desirable based on the flex, but that flex will mostly be concentrated near the top, and actually all the other eye types won't necessarily benefit from anything. And in fact, maybe might be hurt by it if their eye shape and eye color doesn't really look aesthetically appealing at all compared to what they have right now with that stream that currently exists. And so that's something to consider there, is if we just go purely visual aesthetic, you won't get any increased value, and maybe decreased, revaluing of the lower eye type gotchis, and the higher eye types, the very high eye types, would be the ones benefiting the most from that, which is it's a small group amongst asset owners. It's like, two, I don't even know how many asset owners there is, but if there's only, a few got double myth eyes, less than 300, then you're really catering to a small group of collectors, and not really providing any real benefit to the lower tiers. So that's that one side of it, and then the other side is the utility side of it, where you can add utility, and maybe everybody will benefit. All the eye types will benefit in some way, but the higher eye types value might be more tethered to their how they're quantified in terms of what benefit they're giving, rather than a speculative value. I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Those are the two ways I'm looking at it. Not like particularly leaning towards one way or the other, but seeing what you guys are saying here in the chat. The loot box prize could be transient item, like a party hat that only exists for 2 weeks, for example. So after the drop, the value would go away, unless we kept doing drops, in which case special items would face dilution. True, yeah.
I was just thinking for the party hat, if there could
Yeah.
be transient prizes that are just kind of like, hey, this is just fun stuff, and a double myth comes just happens upon a loot box or whatever. It's just kind of like, hey, cool, fun, all right, that was fun, moving on, that kind of thing. But it might not be needed. But I just thought it'd be a fun game mechanic to, pick up, look under a rock and, well, there's a loot box. Oh, I can't open it. I'm not a double myth eye. Well, let me go grab my double myth eye so I can't open it. that kind of thing.
Oh, like a lock
Are-
and key kind of mechanic, and maybe people can collab together, and that creates a rental demand for certain eye types as well, for sure.
Well, also in your guild. So if you've got a guild, and you got just happen to have a couple guys that double miss, then you have opportunities. Hey, if anybody comes along one of these loot boxes that needs double myth or double myth loot box, then hey, let me know. I'll open up and we can share it in the guild.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just echoing on Matt's sentiment there. He's asking why are we just talking about double myth eyes? I think it's a good point. We shouldn't just focus on double myth eyes for the around the eye discussion. I think it is definitely a point that needs to be taken care of, right? Because they're at the top of the whole chain of rarity for eye shape and color. But we should also consider all the other eye types because those are vastly more. There's vastly more of those, and we should definitely make sure that those asset holders are being recognized.
Well, that kind of goes into what you were saying, Hefe, just a little bit ago about kind of a ranked visualization of the different eye rarities that do exist. If there's like uber flex for double myth, then what about rare, uncommon, common? How does all of that pair together? That's a good question.
Oh, Coder Dan kind of has a cool idea. So he says one probably bad idea for eye utility, in addition to whatever flex we give, is that the eyes could function like a rarity drop enhancer, similar to equipping lucky rings in Diablo. So you beat the boss in the dungeon, and you have a higher chance of whatever the drop is. This is really cool because even for that specific gotchi involved, you might want to get your homies involved, and so you all can get that drop. That is something that has happened in other games where it's like, hey, you know what? Make sure you have a double myth eyes in your group when you go do this quest, because that monster has been dropping like crazy stuff for those double myth eyes, and you definitely want to be around for that. There could be a collaboration incentive there.
Or the gotcha that delivers the death blow is the one that the eye rarity is used in the role for the loot.
Yeah, fair enough. That's an alternative as well.
But still, in your party, you're like, okay, hey, boss's health is down to 1. All right, double myth, come in, deliver the death blow.
Yeah, everyone would have to kind of like guard that double myth eye, because if that double myth eye gets killed during the battle, or whatever rare eye gotchi that you have with you gets killed during the battle, you might end up just with a lower reward. And it was a good point someone else made that a lot of the double myth eyes are a lower trait, like lower rarity anyway. So it'd be kind of this cool mechanic where you have a tank or a bunch of tanks protecting the valuable eye gotchi. So you guys can get a better reward near the end when the boss dies. I mean, I think we've had a good conversation around eye traits here. Please continue participating in the eye shape and eye trait discussion. I think we're getting close to somewhere where we can maybe have some actionables, maybe a proposal. I see, Mike Callum, you're chomping at the bit for this hackathon. Are you able to come up on stage, sir, and give a little rundown on what the specifics of this hackathon are?
I'll step
If you
down
don't.
to bring him up.
Thanks. Oh, hardcore. What up? What up?
Okay, they should both be up.
Excellent. Thank
Perfect.
you.
It's Hardcore up here. Hardcore's kind of pro on this, and he's just got me wrapped up in the ringer to see the value of it. And so, it's an opportunity for Gachi Gang to find essentially some funding from outside of our ecosystem, promote what we're doing here, build some tooling that we desperately need within this. Just a lot of cross benefits to it. Hardcore's point on this for sure, but he's convinced me that this is a very, very powerful touch point for us as a community right now.
Yeah, like this is beyond synergistic here. way past synergistic. When we first started the arcade, we had a hackathon, and then from then until now, if you go to Morales' site, it was how to make Aavegotchi stuff on their site. And so now they have a contest where they're going to pay us a bunch to make that kind of stuff, and then for another year it'll be just Aavegotchi stuff on Morales.
And so,
And
the question here
Filecoin
too
will
is how many.
advertise for us too. And you know what? So what if you don't like Filecoin? Because when you get done with the hackathon, just mod it to use whatever you did like after they pay you.
And how many prizes are being paid out again for this hardcore? Because you were mentioning that basically if you have a running piece of code at all.
It was 3,500s, and sorry, I went outside to smoke.
That's okay. So it could be the kind of thing, guys. We're not even trying necessarily to win it. It'd be great to win it, but participation alone is going to be valuable. If you have a running project at all, you're likely going to sweep up one of the 3,500 spots, and it at least gets us an opportunity, some exposure. Everyone in here talks about wanting to do things and wanting to affect things. Well, here's an opportunity to really like put some skills to work, learn some things. Even if you're not a pro at this, it's still fun to try.
Yeah, check it out. Like I'm an absolute hack, and I have won these kind of things before. You go with an open mind, and you look at the technology that they're trying to focus on, or whatever their little hook is that that they're locking you into, and you just combine that with whatever last thing you were really interested in working on was, and pretend you just had that idea right there.
And so hardcore, like I think in this discussion today,
we're about to debut, just attach it to a Filecoin. Just use Morales and attach it to Filecoin. Boom, you got $500.
Well, and even just in today's discussion, what do we have? Like two separate project toolings that came up that are likely candidates for being deployed at Hackathon, right? The on-chain analysis sniffing for botting, and then potentially vote power delegation. Like we have projects we need in this ecosystem that we can build and get paid for.
If you can do like anything identity related, anything where you've got DAOs and sub DAOs, and you can, and it's Sybil proof, and it's got delegation where people are intentionally doing it and they know what they're doing, and they can see what happens, and I don't know. And if we solve any of our problems, like there you go. And it's fun because it only lasts like 2 weeks. So
when does registration close? When do people need to be turned in on this?
Let's see. By September 19th, they announced what it is on the 29th. So I was thinking, look at what all the software needs of the DAO are, and throw those out there as ideas for people to have in the back of their mind when they look at the announcement.
I mean, so for current projects that are already in our ecosystem, would they be able to apply for this? Say you're able to use Morales tooling, you're able to integrate Filecoin. Are those necessary to participate? Or is this something that you'd have to build from scratch?
Or when they do the announcement is when you find out what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now we don't have parameters, like the rules of the hackathon have not been released yet.
Like the ones I've done before, like you sign up and then they're like, okay, so yeah, check in your mail. You got FedEx sent you a thing. Oh, here's an Amazon that, or here's a 4G IoT kit. Or yeah, there's usually some. Hackathons always coincide with the launch of a thing. The first thing they do is have a hackathon, and then they instantly get like some stuff developed, so there's an ecosystem right away. So they're probably releasing something because that's why you do this. So they're going to have something cool and then you also get to be like, hey, I was one of the first people to use that.
And
Yeah.
Andy's asking there if we would need to register as a team, and so there's definitely a little bit of coordination probably to be done. Probably in this server's the best place to aggregate that. So we kind of need to find a place for this chat to keep occurring. Maybe a DAO form spin up. I'm not positive. Where do you think we should aggregate interested parties for this so this can continue out of here?
Well, I mean, the ATF has already served as a space for these discussions. It could be, I think, appropriate to have that in the just ATF general chat. Also, there are developers there that are lurking around that are happy to help.
And where?
Anything people need.
In the very less frequently visited Arcade Task Force Discord servers. Is that what you're talking about, Hefe?
Yeah, let me link it. Let's get
Oh,
some
okay.
people.
All right. I
Yeah,
thought you
there's-
were saying that the DTF. I'm like, no, this is the opposite of that. We're going after other people's treasuries. This is like some pirate shit. Like for
Yeah.
real. Like get together.
Yeah, no, I
Let's
hear
go.
you.
Let's go raid.
Yeah, I hear your sentiment on that.
Cool. So we'll keep everyone
Especially, like,
updated with that as we get closer.
If there's like 6 or 7 of like little groups of us going in there trying to just do one little problem, well, and none of us are duplicating, what it's gonna end up being is it's gonna end up looking like a tutorial if you put them in the right order, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it will just get used as, oh, this is their stuff.
So just be aware it's still in development. It's ongoing. We don't have the parameter specs yet, but this is something to keep on your radar. And we've got so many good dev resources that are budding right now across the ecosystem. So I see like a rep from each one of these power guilds that are currently putting out tooling. And let's start forming some teams and at least prepping our minds for this. And let's kick some ass. It's very possible.
I'd love to throw in an internal event as well. For the future, it's something we can have a conversation, but having some sort of a internal hackathon, kind of what we did for the game jam, but open it up to more ideas in addition to mini games, and have some talent come out of the woodwork, and have some networking and partnerships happening amongst Aavegotchi devs and groups already creating cool stuff.
Well, I'd expect to see you here on this one too, Hefe. And if anything, let's go and see how they do it on this large scale with this large of a purse, and just adopt some best practices, and we'll carry those back home.
Yeah, I echo that. I think it's a great idea.
Well,
Okay.
I
So
did
I mean, hardcore. Any last words there before we? I think
yeah,
we're gonna wrap up.
I bought the pro version of Miro last night, and I gotta do a whole bunch of stuff, but like I can totally keep track of the yeah. I'll set up something so that like devs can organize and like throw project stuff out there and start collating and
Sounds good. Perfect. Yeah, let's keep it up. It's a good idea, and
Creating
appreciate
web.
you being so bullish on it, man. Dan's out of here.
Yeah, you got me a believer in the mirror
oh
board
yeah,
there.
so here's okay. This is one of the projects. This is one of the projects. Ledger's one of the. It's yes. You've got Polygon, Chainlink, Ledger, and so what you need is the personhood thing I was saying, which lets you say yes, these 2 ledgers and this hot wallet and also this Opera wallet over on my phone here too. That's me, and then the game just sees you as that. And it's transparent to that because it's just registered somewhere.
Consolidated ID.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
There's the
cool.
third good project. So
And
yeah, let's get that mirror
then
spun
I
up.
think when you have something like that, then what you do is you make it so that your VP slowly grows. And if everything transfers to a new person, it starts back at its base level for that. So the
Yeah, I
longer
mean,
you maintain personhood and are stand by, well, this is a person here. The longer you stand by that, the better it goes for you.
Yeah, excellent.
which
I mean, that's great.
because the time lock there on the good behavior is irreplaceable, you know?
Yeah, I mean, let's get these ideas
Especially if
on the
it doesn't
mirror
even really
board.
get good till like a year or so.
Yeah, yeah.
Like terribly slow curve.
Yeah, let's get these ideas on the mirror board, and then we can dig into it a little bit more and get something actually actionable happening for this hackathon. Thank you for sharing that. Happy birthday to FaZe. It's his birthday today. You go enjoy that, sir. Go touch some grass.
Let's plan for a better execution of birthday song next week during Summit.
Let's do that. Or FaZe, why don't you make yourself a birthday song and then we'll play it. We'll play it for you and then sing you happy birthday. FaZe is also going to be one of the artists at our GMI Artist Summit. That's going to be happening next week. If there are any of you in the audience who are creative types, whether it's audio, visual, poetic, whatever, anything creative, definitely go reach out to either myself, Mike Callum, one of the other GMI members, and we can see how we can get you involved in the Artist Summit. So, yeah, that's just my little bit there. That's going to be the 27th, right after the hangout. That's what we're aiming for, hopefully. And so, yeah, that's all I got for this meeting today, folks. Thank you for hanging out with us. It's a great discussion around all our DAO topics.
One last thing.
Yeah,
Gotchi Space, 7 p.m. Eastern on Twitter.
7 p.m. Eastern, Gotchi Space on Twitter. Let's continue the conversation there. Do you all have anything else for this week coming up that you want to put out there before we sign off?
Snapshot on Thursday.
Excellent.
We're having a party, right? Is it going to be an event like last Snapshot?
I believe it'll be a gathering. We'll confirm that.
Hey, actually, before we wrap it up too, Anthony just reminded me about that. The episode from A to Z is going to be this Tuesday, so that's the program by ZombieShepherd, NoXZFi, and that's going to be the GMI server. We've secured Sam Padilla from the ATX DAO, and so this individual just this last week went before the Texas state legislature to discuss the future of DAOs and what DAOs are, and how states and governments can approach legislation towards these things. So it should be a really interesting topic on just kind of what the state of DAOs now and the future of DAOs. So it'll be this coming Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, hosted in the GMI server.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for those reminders. And we do have a confirmation. There is an XP event on Thursday, so at least show up for that and make sure you get your XP, and hang out with us. All right, folks.
Tuesday is an XP event too, but it's just mental XP.
Right. Okay. Right on, stuff. Right on, folks. It's great stuff. I got nothing else. Go enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Gotchi Space later tonight. Go touch some grass this week. And that's it. GN, friends. Or GM for some. Peace.